Annie Wilkins was born into a time when life was hard, especially for those living in rural areas of the United States. Born in 1891, she grew up on a modest farm in Maine, where she learned from an early age the values of hard work, simplicity, and connection to the land. Her childhood was marked by long hours caring for animals, planting crops, and helping her family survive in an often hostile environment. Despite the hardships, Annie had something that few at that time could afford: to have dreams. Dreams that, for decades, remained hidden deep in her heart, waiting for the right moment to be fulfilled. At 63 years old, Annie had already been through a lot in her life. She had worked tirelessly on the farm, endured hard times during the Great Depression, and learned to live on a shoestring. However, her health was beginning to fail, and doctors gave her devastating news. She did not have long to live. This revelation could have been the end of her hopes, but for Annie, it was the beginning of something extraordinary. She decided that if her days were numbered, she wanted to make the most of them. And what she wanted most was to see the Pacific Ocean, a place she had always dreamed of visiting, but which seemed as far away as the stars in the sky. But how could an elderly woman, without significant financial resources, accomplish such a feat? For Annie, the answer lay in Tarzan, her faithful horse, and Depeche Toi, her inseparable dog. These two companions were all she needed to face the unknown. Without hesitation, she sold everything she had, prepared Tarzan and Depeche Toi for the journey, and in November 1954, she set off from her farm in Augusta, Maine, heading west. It was not just a trip. It was a declaration of courage, proof that it is never too late to pursue your dreams. Many may think that Annie was being impulsive or naive, but she knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that the journey would be difficult, that she would face adverse weather conditions, dangerous roads, and possibly even loneliness. But she also knew that she had something that few possess: unwavering determination. With Tarzan at her side and Depeche Toi trotting behind, she began her adventure with a heart full of hope and an indomitable spirit. Each step she took was one step closer to realizing the dream that she had carried with her all her life. And so, Annie Wilkins began her epic journey, showing the world that no matter your age or circumstances, it is possible to find the strength to overcome any obstacle. Annie Wilkins' journey began at one of the coldest times of the year. In November 1954, temperatures in Maine were below freezing, and the biting wind seemed to whisper in her ear that she should give up before she even started. But Annie was not the type of person to be intimidated by adverse conditions. Riding on Tarzan, with Depeche Toi following close behind, she faced the freezing cold and snow-covered roads with a courage that inspired everyone she met. The first few miles were the hardest. Annie faced snowstorms that turned the trails into veritable traps. Tarzan's paws sank into the snow, and the weight of the cold seemed crushing. But Annie knew she could not give up. She talked to Tarzan, encouraging him to keep going, while Depeche Toi, ever loyal, seemed to understand the importance of this mission and followed her every step with dedication. Along the way, Annie found kindness where she least expected it: small rural towns, where people lived simple lives like hers, opened their doors to this courageous woman. Many were amazed by her story and offered shelter, food, and words of encouragement. Some even took Tarzan under their wing, feeding him and making sure he was strong enough to carry on. These encounters strengthened her faith in humanity and renewed her energy to carry on. But it wasn't all easy. There were times when loneliness weighed heavily on her shoulders. Long hours on the road, with no one but Tarzan and Depeche Toi around, could have been overwhelming. Yet Annie found comfort in the stillness. She would talk to Tarzan as if he were an old friend, sharing thoughts and dreams as they went along. In these silent conversations, she found the strength to keep going, reminding herself that every mile she traveled brought her closer to her ultimate goal, the Pacific Ocean. There were also moments of danger. Once, Tarzan slipped on a muddy trail and nearly fell into a ravine. Annie had to use all her strength to hold the reins and keep them both from falling. Another time, a sudden storm surprised them, and they had to seek shelter in a makeshift cave. Even so, Annie never lost her calm. She knew that with patience and perseverance, she could overcome any obstacle. Each difficulty she faced was a lesson learned, proof that she was on the right path. By the end of the first month, Annie had already traveled hundreds of kilometers. Although she was still far from her destination, she felt that she was making progress. Each city she passed through, each new landscape she saw, was a reminder that she was closer to realizing her dream. And with Tarzan and Depeche Toi by her side, she knew she could face any challenge that came her way. The journey, challenges, and achievements after leaving Maine behind. Annie entered unknown territories. Each state she crossed brought new challenges, but also new breathtaking landscapes. She rode through dense forests, open fields, and steep mountains, always with her eyes fixed on the horizon. With each kilometer traveled, she felt that she was closer to her goal. But she also realized that the journey was far from easy. One of the greatest difficulties was facing the changing climate. While Maine was marked by intense cold, other states had completely different climates. In some regions, the scorching heat made the journey exhausting. Annie had to stop frequently to rest and make sure Tarzan and Depeche Toi were hydrated. On other occasions, torrential rains turned the roads into veritable rivers of mud, making progress even more difficult. But even in these adverse conditions, Annie kept going. She knew that nature was unpredictable and that, in order to achieve her dream, she would have to accept its whims. Another major challenge was the lack of financial resources. Annie did not have enough money to sustain herself throughout the journey, so she had to rely on the kindness of strangers and the small jobs she could find along the way. In some towns, she would help out on farms or take care of animals in exchange for food and shelter. On these occasions, she was met with admiration and respect. Many were impressed by her courage and determination, and some even called her an unlikely hero. To these people, Annie was proof that age and circumstances do not define our abilities. Despite all the hardships, there were moments of pure joy as she traversed stunning landscapes. From snow-capped mountains to vast fields golden with sunlight, Annie felt a deep connection with nature she would stop to admire the beauty around her, allowing herself to appreciate every detail of the journey. During these pauses, she would reflect on the meaning of her journey and how each obstacle she overcame made her stronger. The attention Annie received along the way was also surprising. As her stories spread, local newspapers began to publish stories about the horsewoman. People came out of their homes to watch her pass, offering support and words of encouragement. For many, Annie was an inspiration, proof that it is possible to overcome any obstacle with determination and courage. And for her, this connection with people was a reminder that her journey was not just personal, but collective. The arrival at the ocean, the dream come true. After 2.5 years of an epic journey, Annie Wilkins finally arrived in California. Her tired feet, her hands calloused from constant use of the reins, and her body scarred from thousands of miles traveled reflected the magnitude of what she had achieved. But even exhausted, her soul shone with an unwavering light. When she saw the waves of the Pacific Ocean for the first time, something inside her calmed down. It was as if all the hardships she had faced, all the effort she had dedicated, had been worth it for that moment. She slowly got off Tarzan, feeling the weight of each step she had taken up until that point. She walked to the water's edge, letting the waves touch her feet as tears streamed down her face. They were not tears of sadness, but of gratitude for having achieved a dream that seemed impossible. Tarzan, at her side, seemed to understand the importance of that moment. He lowered his head, as if he too were contemplating the vastness of the ocean. Depeche Toi, ever faithful, sat at her feet, completing the scene as a perfect image of unity and resilience. For Annie, that rival was more than just reaching a destination. It was the fulfillment of a promise she had made to herself. It was proof that, no matter the circumstances, it is never too late to pursue your dreams. She had proven to the world and, more importantly, to herself, that age, financial hardship and physical obstacles do not have to be insurmountable barriers. With determination, courage, and love for her companions, she had crossed the United States on horseback, facing adverse conditions and overcoming challenges that many would have considered impossible. Those who followed her journey, both in person and in the newspapers, were deeply touched by Annie's achievement. To many, she was an unlikely heroine, an elderly woman who had accomplished something extraordinary at a time when few women dared to defy social conventions. Her story inspired generations, showing that inner strength and resilience can move mountains. And for Annie, the impact of her journey went beyond public recognition. It was a personal victory, a gift she had given herself before it was too late. As she looked toward the horizon, Annie knew her journey did not end there. Although she had achieved her goal, she felt that the real transformation had occurred within her. The woman who had set out from Maine 2.5 years earlier was different from the woman who now gazed out over the Pacific. She had learned to trust herself, to accept the kindness of strangers, and to find beauty in the little things. And with Tarzan and Depeche Toi, she had created memories that would last a lifetime. The legacy of OLD Annie Wilkins, a timeless story, Old Annie Wilkins' story did not end with her rival in the Pacific Ocean. Although she departed this world in 1967, her legacy lives on, inspiring people around the globe. She was not just a woman who rode across the United States. She was a symbol of perseverance, courage, and love for animals. Her journey teaches us that it is never too late to pursue our dreams, no matter how distant or impossible they may seem. Horse Tarzan and dog Depeche Toi, her faithful companions, remain an eternal part of her story. Without them, that journey would not have been possible. They represent the importance of the connection between humans and animals, a bond that transcends words. Horse Tarzan, with his strength and loyalty, carried Old Annie for thousands of miles, facing adverse conditions without ever faltering. Dog Depeche Toi, with his constant presence, brought comfort and joy during the most difficult times. Together, they formed an inseparable team, showing the world that friendship and partnership can overcome any obstacle. Today, decades later, Old Annie Wilkins' story continues to inspire. Books have been written about her journey, documentaries have been produced, and people around the world are moved to hear her story. She was not seeking fame or glory. She was simply seeking to fulfill a simple dream. Yet her courage has echoed through generations, reminding us that within each of us lies a flame capable of illuminating the most difficult path. Old Annie also teaches us about the importance of human kindness. Throughout her journey, she was helped by countless people who welcomed her, offered shelter, and shared their stories. These encounters strengthened her faith in humanity and showed her that even in the darkest moments, there is always someone willing to lend a hand. Her journey was proof that solidarity and empathy can unite people from different backgrounds and cultures. Furthermore, Old Annie reminds us of the importance of living with purpose. She could have chosen to spend her final years in silence, accepting the limitations imposed by her health and circumstances. Instead, she chose to live life to the fullest, seizing every moment to accomplish something meaningful. Her story is a reminder that life should not be measured by how long we live, but by how we choose to live it. Ultimately, Old Annie Wilkins' legacy is a call for all of us to pursue our own dreams. No matter what challenges we may face, she shows us that with courage, determination, and love, we can overcome any obstacle and achieve the impossible. Her epic journey is not just a story about a woman and her horse. It is a story about the strength of the human spirit and the power of dreams to keep us going.
Did you enjoy this incredible story? If you were inspired by the journey of Old Annie Wilkins, Horse Tarzan, and Dog Depeche Toi, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this. Leave your comment below. What struck you most about this adventure? Share your thoughts with us. Like our video to support our work and help this story reach more people. Share this video with your friends and family. Let's spread the message of courage, determination, and love for dreams. And remember, just like Old Annie, it's never too late to pursue your own goals. Together, we can inspire the world.